The folding chair wobbled under me, one leg shorter than the others, positioned so close to the kitchen's swinging doors that I could smell the garbage bins every time a server passed. My sister's baby shower was in full bloom around me, pastel balloons, champagne towers, laughter that sparkled like the crystal chandeliers overhead, and I was seated at the table they'd labeled overflow seating, which was really just a polite way of saying, the people we had to invite but don't actually want here. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Across the room, my sister Camilla glowed in her silk maternity dress, surrounded by aunts and cousins who cooed over her growing belly like it was the eighth wonder of the world. Next to her sat our mother, Diane, whose smile was warm and wide for everyone except me. She hadn't looked in my direction once since I'd arrived 30 minutes late, still wearing my work clothes because I'd come straight from the office. The venue was stunning, I had to admit. The Harrington Estate, a sprawling garden pavilion on the edge of Bellevue Heights, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured rose gardens and a stone fountain that probably cost more than my annual salary. White linens, gold cutlery, servers in crisp uniforms gliding between tables like they were performing ballet. It was the kind of place where every detail whispered wealth and taste. And here I was, next to the trash. "More water, miss?" A young server appeared at my elbow, her expression carefully neutral as she refilled my glass. She didn't meet my eyes, and I wondered if she'd been instructed not to linger at this table. "Thank you," I murmured, watching as she hurried away toward the main tables where the real guests sat. My cousin Jillian passed by with her husband, both of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. She glanced at me, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Oh, Natasha, I didn't see you there. Are you comfortable?" The word dripped with condescension. "Perfectly," I said, keeping my voice level. She didn't wait for more. She just swept past, her perfume lingering in the air like a taunt. I'd known this was coming. The moment Camilla announced her pregnancy 6 months ago, I'd known that every family gathering from that point forward would be an exercise in reminding me of my place. The black sheep. The one who'd chosen a different path. The sister who'd walked away from the family business to build something on her own, and in doing so, had committed the unforgivable sin of independence. They'd never forgiven me for leaving Ashford and Company, the luxury hotel empire our grandfather had built from nothing. Camilla had stayed, married Preston Dalton, a man whose last name opened more doors than his personality ever could, and now she was about to deliver the next generation of the Ashford legacy. Meanwhile, I was the cautionary tale, the one they whispered about at Thanksgiving dinners when they thought I couldn't hear. A burst of laughter erupted from the main table. My mother was telling a story, her hands animated, her voice carrying across the room. Everyone leaned in, captivated. I recognized the story. It was about the time Camilla won a junior equestrian competition when she was 12. Our mother had told it 100 times, polishing it like a trophy until it gleamed. She never told stories about me. I glanced down at my plate. Salmon, asparagus, roasted potatoes, all artfully arranged and completely untouched. My appetite had vanished the moment I'd seen the seating chart, my name scrawled at the bottom in handwriting that looked almost apologetic. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I'd been the one planning events like this. I'd worked in luxury hospitality for nearly a decade, managing properties across 3 continents before I'd finally saved enough to pursue my own vision. I knew what it took to execute a flawless event. I knew the weight of every detail, every carefully chosen flower arrangement, every precisely timed course. And I knew that seating someone by the kitchen doors wasn't an accident. It was a message. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out discreetly, expecting a work email or maybe a text from one of the few friends who'd actually remembered to check in on me today. Instead, it was a notification from my bank. Transaction approved, $340,000. I stared at the screen, my heart skipping. That was the final payment. The last piece of the puzzle I'd been assembling for 3 years. The investment I'd made, the risk I'd taken, the dream I'd refused to let anyone, including my own family, talk me out of. It was done. A shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find a man in a charcoal suit standing there, his posture upright, his expression unreadable. He was older, maybe in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that suggested he was used to being listened to. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but firm. "Are you Natasha Ashford?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes." He extended his hand. "My name is Leonard Kirby. I'm the owner of the Harrington estate." I shook his hand, confused. Venue owners didn't usually introduce themselves to guests, especially not guests seated in the forgotten corner of the room. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It's a beautiful venue," I said carefully. "My sister made an excellent choice." His expression shifted, something almost like amusement flickering in his eyes. "Actually," he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear, "your sister didn't choose this venue. You did." I froze. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. 3 years ago, you secured the investment that saved this estate from foreclosure. You're listed as the primary stakeholder in the Harrington Holdings portfolio. Which means, Miss Ashford, that as of 6 months ago, you became my boss." The noise of the party seemed to fade into the background. My pulse hammered in my ears. "I recognized your name on the guest list," he continued, his tone growing warmer. "And when I saw where they'd seated you, I thought there must have been some mistake. But then I watched your family for the past half hour, and I realized, they don't know, do they?" I couldn't speak. My throat had gone dry. Leonard Kirby, the man whose reputation in luxury hospitality was legendary, whose estates were synonymous with elegance and exclusivity, was standing in front of me, calling me his boss. And my family, the people who'd spent years making me feel small, had no idea that I owned the very ground they were standing on. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Would you like me to tell them?" For the first time all day, I smiled. "Not yet," I said quietly. "But soon." Leonard Kirby didn't leave immediately. Instead, he pulled out the empty chair across from me, the one that had remained conspicuously vacant all afternoon, and sat down with the kind of authority that made it clear he wasn't asking permission. "Tell me," he said, folding his hands on the table, "how long have they been treating you like this?" I glanced toward the main tables where Camilla was opening gifts, each box more extravagant than the last. Designer baby clothes, imported cribs, jewelry that would someday be passed down as heirlooms. Our mother stood behind her, one hand resting on Camilla's shoulder like she was posing for a portrait of maternal devotion. "Always," I said simply. "Or at least, ever since I stopped playing by their rules." Leonard nodded slowly, his eyes tracking the same scene I was watching. "I've hosted hundreds of events here over the years. Weddings, galas, corporate retreats. You learn to read families pretty quickly in this business. And yours." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Yours has a very particular kind of cruelty. The kind that smiles while it cuts." He wasn't wrong. My family had perfected the art of exclusion wrapped in politeness. They never yelled, never made scenes. They simply arranged the world so that you knew exactly where you stood, and that place was always just outside the circle of warmth. "When did you invest in the Harrington estate?" I asked, deflecting from the discomfort of his observation. 3 years ago, like I said." "But you knew that already, didn't you?" His eyes crinkled slightly. "You've been watching the portfolio reports." "I send them quarterly." I had been watching. The Harrington estate had been one of 12 properties I'd invested in through a private equity firm I'd partnered with after leaving Ashford & Company. I'd used every penny of my savings, taken out loans I was still paying off, and bet everything on the belief that luxury hospitality was shifting, that people wanted authentic experiences, not just brand names. The Harrington had been struggling when I'd found it. Beautiful bones, incredible location, but mismanaged and drowning in debt. Leonard had been brought in to save it, and somehow, against all odds, he had. Within 18 months, the estate had gone from near bankruptcy to being featured in Architectural Digest and hosting A-list weddings. "You've done incredible work here," I said quietly. "The reviews, the bookings, the reputation you've built, it's beyond what I'd hoped for." "That's kind of you to say, but we both know you're the reason this place is still standing." He leaned back in his chair. "Your investment came with conditions. You demanded transparency, ethical labor practices, profit sharing with staff. Most investors just want their returns. You actually cared about the people who work here." I felt a flush creep up my neck. I'd added those stipulations because I'd seen too many luxury properties built on the backs of underpaid, overworked staff. I'd been one of those staff members once, grinding through 18-hour days while executives took credit for my work. "They deserve to benefit from the success they create," I said. "Exactly." Leonard's voice dropped lower. "Which is why, when I saw them seat you here like some kind of afterthought, I knew I needed to say something. These people, your family, they're celebrating in a building you saved. Eating food prepared in kitchens you funded. Drinking champagne they could only afford because you made this venue profitable enough for your sister to book it." The weight of it settled over me like a heavy coat. He was right. Every detail of this baby shower, every elegant touch that made Camilla look like she'd arrived at the pinnacle of sophisticated taste, existed because of money I'd invested and risks I'd taken. And they'd put me by the trash. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. "About my involvement with the estate?" "Only my senior staff. We keep investor information confidential unless you request otherwise." He tilted his head. "But I'm guessing you've kept this quiet for a reason." I had. After I'd left the family business, I'd wanted to prove I could succeed without the Ashford name. I'd used my mother's maiden name, Holloway, for all my business dealings. Created an LLC that kept my personal identity separate from my investments. I'd built everything quietly, deliberately, without fanfare. Because I'd known that if my family found out I was succeeding, they'd find a way to diminish it. Or worse, they'd try to take credit for it. "Natasha." A voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up to see my Aunt Phyllis approaching, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was my mother's older sister, and she'd perfected the art of backhanded compliments. "There you are, hiding in the corner," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just telling Diane how nice it is that you could take time off work to be here." "What is it you do again?" "Something with hotels?" Leonard stood smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. "Actually, Mrs. Calloway, my aunt supplied," her attention shifting to him with sudden interest. "Phyllis Calloway." "Mrs. Calloway, I'm Leonard Kirby, owner and operator of the Harrington estate." He extended his hand, and she took it eagerly, her entire demeanor changing. "Oh, Mr. Kirby. What a stunning venue." "Absolutely stunning. You must be so proud." "I am," he said evenly. "Though I can't take all the credit. This estate's revival was made possible by some very astute investors who saw potential where others saw only risk." Phyllis nodded absently, already losing interest in talk of business and money. "Well, it's magnificent. Camilla has such good taste." "Indeed," Leonard said, and I caught the slight edge in his voice. "Though I was just telling Miss Ashford here that she has an exceptional eye for luxury hospitality herself. In fact." "Leonard," I interrupted softly, catching his eye. "Thank you for stopping by." He paused, reading my expression, then nodded. "Of course. It was a pleasure, Miss Ashford." He turned back to my aunt. "Mrs. Calloway, enjoy the rest of the celebration." He walked away, and Phyllis watched him go with an expression that suggested she was already planning how to name-drop this interaction at her next bridge club meeting. "Well," she said, turning back to me. "That was unexpected. I suppose even the overflow table gets some attention." She laughed at her own joke, then drifted back toward the main tables. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, my mind racing. Leonard had offered to tell them. To stand up in front of my entire family and reveal that I wasn't just some wayward daughter who'd abandoned the family legacy, I was a successful investor who owned the very venue they'd chosen for this celebration. But something held me back. Because this wasn't just about embarrassing them. This wasn't about a dramatic reveal that would give me 5 minutes of satisfaction before things went back to the way they'd always been. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, scrolling until I found the message I was looking for. It was from my attorney, sent 2 weeks ago, outlining the final steps for a project I'd been planning for months. A new luxury boutique hotel. Not part of a chain, not connected to any existing brand. Something entirely mine. And I needed a flagship property to launch it. My fingers hovered over the screen as an idea began to take shape, an idea that was audacious, possibly reckless, but also perfectly, deliciously fitting. I typed out a message to my attorney, move forward with the Harrington acquisition proposal. I want full ownership by end of quarter. Then I looked up at my family, still laughing and celebrating, still completely unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. They'd put me by the trash. But soon, they'd learn exactly who owned the palace. The champagne toast had just finished when I excused myself from the overflow table. No one noticed. They were too busy applauding Camilla's tearful speech about motherhood and family bonds, words that felt like they were aimed at everyone in the room except me. I slipped through the French doors onto the terrace, pulling my phone from my clutch as the cool evening air hit my face. The sun was beginning its descent over Bellevue Heights, casting everything in shades of amber and gold. From here, I could see the entire estate, the rose gardens, the vintage gazebo where countless wedding ceremonies had taken place, the stone pathway that wound through perfectly manicured hedges. My estate. Or it would be, if I moved forward with what I was about to do. I dialed a number I'd called at least once a week for the past 3 years. It rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Holloway Acquisitions, this is Raymond. Raymond Shen had been my attorney since I'd started investing. He was sharp, discreet, and had a talent for navigating complex deals without leaving fingerprints. We'd structured every single one of my investments to keep my personal identity buried under layers of LLCs and holding companies. It's me, I said, keeping my voice low. I sent you an email 10 minutes ago. I saw it. There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling. Natasha, are you sure about this? Acquiring full ownership of the Harrington estate is a significant move. We're talking about buying out the other stakeholders, assuming complete operational control, and... I know what it means, I interrupted. Can we do it? Another pause. Legally? Yes. You're already the primary stakeholder with 42% ownership. The next largest investor holds 18%, and they've been looking to liquidate for months. If we move quickly and offer the right price, we could consolidate controlling interest within 6 weeks. 6 weeks. That was faster than I'd expected. What about Leonard Kirby? I asked. He has operational control and a profit-sharing agreement. I don't want to push him out. We can structure it so he maintains his position as managing director with enhanced terms. In fact, if you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll want him on your side. Raymond's tone shifted, becoming more cautious. But I have to ask, why now? Why this property? You have interests in 11 other venues. What makes the Harrington so important? I looked back through the French doors. Inside, my mother was posing for photos with Camilla, both of them smiling like they were in a magazine spread. My sister's hand rested on her belly, the universal symbol of maternal fulfillment. Our mother's hand covered hers, completing the picture of generational love and continuity. A picture I would never be part of. Because, I said quietly, they need to understand that I'm not the failure they think I am. And the only way they'll understand that is if I show them, undeniably, that I've built something they can't ignore. Raymond was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. This is about more than business, isn't it? Everything is about more than business, I said. Draw up the paperwork. I want to move fast. Understood. I'll have preliminary documents ready for review by tomorrow morning. He hesitated. Natasha, one more thing. If you do this, if you acquire full ownership, it becomes public record. Your name will be attached to the property. No more hiding behind holding companies. My breath caught. That was the piece I'd been avoiding thinking about. For 3 years, I'd operated in the shadows, building wealth and influence without anyone knowing. It had been safer that way. Quieter. Less vulnerable to my family's judgment and interference. But Leonard was right. They'd seated me by the trash in a building I'd saved from bankruptcy. They'd made me feel small in a space that existed because of my vision and my capital. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. I understand, I told Raymond. Do it anyway. We ended the call, and I stood there for a moment, letting the reality of what I'd just set in motion wash over me. There was no going back now. Within weeks, possibly days, my family would know everything. They'd know about the investments, the properties, the quiet empire I'd been building while they'd written me off as a disappointment. The French doors opened behind me. I turned, expecting a server or maybe another guest looking for fresh air. Instead, it was Preston Dalton, my sister's husband. Preston was everything my family valued in a son-in-law: impeccably dressed, professionally successful, and connected to old money that stretched back 4 generations. He worked in private equity, the kind of work where deals happened over golf games and handshake agreements that moved millions. Natasha, he said, stepping onto the terrace with a champagne flute in one hand. Taking a break from the festivities? Something like that. I kept my tone neutral. Preston and I had never been close, but he'd never been overtly cruel either. He existed in that middle space of polite indifference. He joined me at the railing, looking out over the gardens. Beautiful venue. Camilla was thrilled when it became available on such short notice. Short notice? I asked, my attention sharpening. Apparently they had a cancellation, some corporate retreat that fell through. Leonard Kirby himself called to offer the date. Very accommodating. Preston took a sip of his champagne. Though I have to say, the pricing was surprisingly reasonable for a property of this caliber. My jaw tightened. Leonard had given them a discount. He'd probably done it as a courtesy to me, not realizing it would make my family feel even more entitled to a space they'd never earned. Preston, I said carefully, how much do you know about the Harrington Estates ownership structure? He shrugged. Not much. Privately held, I think. Some investment group bought it a few years back when it was failing. Turned it around pretty impressively. Why do you ask? So he didn't know either. None of them did. Just curious, I said. I work in hospitality. It's interesting to see who's succeeding in the market. Right, you do something with hotels, don't you? He said it the way people say things they're not actually interested in. Camilla mentioned you'd been working abroad for a while. I was. Europe, mostly. Asia for a bit. All true, though I'd left out the part where I'd been consulting for luxury brands and using that income to fund my investment portfolio. Well, it's good you could make it back for this. Preston glanced at his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than most people's cars. Though I should probably head back inside. Camilla will wonder where I've gone. He started to leave, then paused. By the way, I'm sorry about the seating situation. I don't know who arranged the chart, but it seemed odd. It was the closest thing to sympathy anyone in my family had offered all day. It's fine, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. He nodded and disappeared back inside, leaving me alone on the terrace once more. My phone buzzed. A text from Raymond, spoke with the secondary stakeholders. 3 of 5 are interested in selling. This could move even faster than anticipated. Stand by. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of momentum building. In business, there was a phrase for this moment, the point of no return. It was the instant when you committed so fully to a course of action that retreat became impossible. I'd reached that point. Inside, someone had started playing music. I could hear the soft strings of a quartet, the murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses. The party was shifting into its evening phase, that golden hour when everyone was relaxed and sentimental. But I wasn't going back in there. Not yet. Instead, I walked down the terrace steps into the gardens, following the stone pathway until the noise of the party faded to a distant hum. I found myself at the fountain, a massive structure of carved marble that had been imported from Italy a century ago. Water cascaded down in tiers, catching the last rays of sunlight. I sat on the fountain's edge and let myself think about what came next. Acquiring the Harrington was just the beginning. Once I had full ownership, I'd need to decide what to do with it. Keep it as a standalone venue? Make it the flagship of a new brand? Use it as proof of concept for investors who still doubted that a woman in her early 30s could run a luxury hospitality empire? All of the above, probably. But more than that, I needed to decide how to tell my family. Not if. That ship had sailed the moment I'd instructed Raymond to move forward, but how? I could do it quietly, let them find out through whispers and speculation. Or I could do it the way they'd done things to me my entire life, publicly, undeniably, in a way that left no room for interpretation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Leonard Kirby. Miss Ashford, I understand you're considering a significant change in your involvement with the estate. I'm at your complete disposal to discuss next steps. Would tomorrow morning work for a meeting? LK. I smiled despite myself. Of course he already knew. Raymond must have reached out to him immediately to ensure operational continuity. I typed back, tomorrow, 9 a.m. And Leonard, when this all goes public, I need you to trust me. His response came quickly, always have. Looking forward to working with you directly, boss. That word again. Boss. It should have felt satisfying, but instead it felt heavy with responsibility. Because once everyone knew, once my family, my former colleagues, the entire industry knew what I'd built, there would be no more hiding behind anonymity. No more quiet victories celebrated alone. I'd be visible. Exposed. Accountable. But I'd also be undeniable. I stood up from the fountain's edge and turned back toward the estate. The building glowed with warm light from within, every window a tableau of celebration and joy. My sister's joy. My family's joy. Soon, they'd learn it was built on a foundation I'd laid. And then, finally, they'd have to see me. I didn't sleep that night. After the baby shower ended, after I'd driven home to my small apartment in the city, a place my mother had once described as quaint, in a tone that meant inadequate, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and spreadsheets glowing in the darkness. The numbers told a story my family would never have believed. 3 years of careful investments, strategic partnerships, and calculated risks had turned my initial stake of $80,000, money I'd saved from years of 70-hour work weeks, into a portfolio worth just over $4 million. Not billionaire money. Not even close to what the Ashford family considered real wealth. But it was mine. Every dollar earned through my own judgment, my own expertise, my own willingness to bet on properties that others had given up on. The Harrington estate was the crown jewel. And tomorrow morning, I'd begin the process of making it entirely mine. At 8:45, I pulled into the estate's private entrance, the one reserved for staff and vendors. My car, a sensible sedan that was 5 years old and had a dent in the rear bumper, looked absurdly out of place next to the gleaming luxury vehicles parked in the guest lot. But I wasn't a guest anymore. Leonard was waiting for me in his office, a converted library on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows that overlooked the rose gardens. He stood when I entered, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. Coffee, he offered. I had my assistant bring up the good stuff. None of that hotel lobby nonsense. Please, I said, grateful. I'd been running on adrenaline and anxiety since yesterday. He poured 2 cups from a French press, then settled into his chair with the ease of someone who'd spent decades in positions of authority. I spoke with Raymond this morning. He's moving quickly on the acquisition. Too quickly? I asked. No such thing in business. Strike while the terms are favorable. He took a sip of his coffee. But I wanted to talk to you about something before the paperwork starts flying. About what happens after you take full ownership. I'd been expecting this conversation. Leonard had built his reputation on the Harringtons' resurrection. If I came in and changed everything, it could damage both the property's success and his legacy. I'm not here to dismantle what you've built, I said carefully. The Harrington is successful because of your management. I want to expand on that, not replace it. I appreciate that. But expansion means change, and change in this industry is delicate. He leaned forward, his expression serious. What exactly are you planning, Natasha? It was the first time he'd used my first name. Something about it made the conversation feel less like a business negotiation and more like a mentorship moment. I set down my coffee cup. I want to create a new brand. Small luxury hotels that aren't part of the major chains. Properties with character and history, managed by people who actually care about hospitality, not just profit margins. The Harrington would be the flagship. Leonard was quiet for a moment, processing. That's ambitious. The market is saturated with boutique hotel concepts. Not like this, I countered. Most boutique brands are either too small to scale or they get bought out by conglomerates and lose their identity. I want to build something in between, big enough to have influence, small enough to maintain authenticity. And you think you can do this without family money? Without the Ashford name? There it was. The question everyone would ask once they knew what I was attempting. I've already done it, I said quietly. The portfolio I've built over the past 3 years is proof of concept. The Harrington's success is proof of concept. I don't need my family's money or their name. I need properties with potential and partners who understand the vision. Leonard studied me with an intensity that made me wonder what he was really looking for. Finally, he nodded. Your family is going to fight this. You know that, right? The moment they find out you own the Harrington, they'll try to undermine it. They'll call in favors, spread rumors, do whatever it takes to make you fail. I know. I'd been preparing for that reality since the moment I'd sent the email to Raymond. And you're willing to risk it anyway? I thought about yesterday. About the folding chair by the kitchen doors. About my mother's deliberate blindness to my existence. About Camilla's perfectly curated celebration in a venue she'd never have been able to afford if not for my investment. They've already decided I'm a failure, I said. At least this way, I'll fail on my own terms. Leonard smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd been waiting to hear exactly that. Then let's make sure you don't fail at all. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. I took the liberty of preparing something for you. I opened the file. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, from yesterday's baby shower. But these weren't the posed, formal shots that would end up in my sister's photo album. These were behind-the-scenes images, the staff setting up the overflow table in the corner, the seating chart with my name relegated to the bottom, a shot of my mother deliberately turning away when I tried to catch her eye. I don't understand, I said, looking up at him. Documentation, Leonard said simply. Your attorney will need evidence of how they've treated you. Not for a lawsuit, I know that's not your style. But when you go public with your ownership, your family will try to spin a narrative. They'll claim you're being vindictive, that you're using business to settle personal scores. These photos show the context. I stared at the images, feeling something tight and painful in my chest. I hadn't realized anyone had been watching. Hadn't known that someone had cared enough to document what I'd experienced. Why did you do this? I asked. Leonard's expression softened. Because I've worked in luxury hospitality for 40 years, and I've seen every kind of family dynamic imaginable. The wealthy ones are often the worst, they weaponize courtesy, turn exclusion into an art form. When I saw how they treated you yesterday, in a venue you saved, at an event that wouldn't exist without your investment. He shook his head. Someone needed to bear witness. I closed the file carefully, my hand steadier than I felt. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We have work to do. He pulled out another document. This is a preliminary proposal for rebranding the Harrington as part of a larger collection. I've been playing with concepts since our conversation yesterday. Take a look. I scanned the pages. He'd outlined everything, potential names for the brand, design concepts, operational structures, even preliminary financial projections. It was thorough, professional, and exactly the kind of strategic thinking I'd need to make this work. You did all this overnight? I asked, impressed. I'm 73 years old. I don't sleep much anymore. He grinned. Besides, I haven't been this excited about a project in years. The big chains are boring. They've optimized all the soul out of hospitality. What you're proposing, this could actually matter. We spent the next 2 hours going through the proposal, refining ideas, identifying potential properties that might fit the vision. Leonard knew the industry inside and out, and he had connections I couldn't have built in a decade. By the time we finished, I had the skeleton of a business plan that could actually work. There's one more thing, Leonard said as I was preparing to leave. Your family is going to find out about this sooner than you think. The baby shower photos are already circulating on social media. Your sister posted dozens of them. It's only a matter of time before someone notices the venue and starts asking questions about ownership. My stomach tightened. I'd been counting on having a few weeks to prepare, to get the acquisition finalized before going public. But Leonard was right, in the age of social media, secrets didn't stay secret for long. How much time do you think I have? I asked. Days. Maybe less. He walked me to the door. Which means you need to decide right now, do you want to control the narrative, or do you want to react to it? I knew the answer before he finished the question. I'd spent my entire life reacting to my family's version of reality, trying to defend myself against their judgments and assumptions. If I was going to do this, really do this, I needed to tell my story first. I'll control it, I said. Leonard nodded approvingly. Good. Then I suggest you draft a statement. Something clear and factual that explains your involvement with the Harrington and your plans going forward. Release it before they can twist the truth. I left his office with my mind racing. A statement. Public disclosure. The end of anonymity. Everything I'd been avoiding for 3 years was about to become unavoidable. In my car, I pulled out my phone and called Raymond. How fast can we accelerate the acquisition timeline? I asked without preamble. If you're willing to pay a premium and waive some of the due diligence periods, we could potentially close in 2 weeks instead of 6. Do it. Whatever it costs. Natasha. I need full ownership before this becomes public, I interrupted. My family is going to fight this, and I can't give them any opening to interfere. If I own it outright before they know what's happening, they can't stop me. Raymond was silent for a moment. This is going to get ugly. It already is ugly, I said. Now it's just going to be honest. I ended the call and sat in the parking lot, looking up at the Harrington estate. The morning sun caught the windows, making the entire building glow like something out of a fairy tale. Beautiful, elegant, perfect. And soon, undeniably mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but something made me look. It was a screenshot of Instagram. My sister's post from yesterday, a photo of her opening gifts, surrounded by family, everyone laughing and radiant. The caption read, "Blessed beyond measure. So grateful for family and this perfect day at the stunning Harrington estate." Someone had commented, "Gorgeous venue. How did you book it?" My sister's reply, "Connections. You know how it is." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Connections. As if she'd earned this. As if it had been given to her through charm or relationships or anything other than my money and my risk. I saved the screenshot and added it to the folder I'd been building. Evidence. Documentation. Truth. Then I started typing the statement that would change everything. The statement took me 6 hours to write. Not because the words were difficult to find, but because every sentence needed to be precise, unassailable, and clear enough that even my family couldn't twist it into something I hadn't said. By 7 that evening, I had a draft I could work with. I sent it to Raymond for legal review and to Leonard for industry perspective. Then I did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my tiny apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life in the distance. My phone rang at 8:30. It was Raymond. "The statement is legally sound," he said without preamble. "But Natasha, once you release this, there's no walking it back. Your family will know everything. The industry will know everything. Are you absolutely certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Then I suggest you prepare for impact. I've seen families implode over less than this." His voice softened slightly. "Do you have support? People who can be there when this gets difficult?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Support. I had colleagues, professional contacts, a few friends scattered across different cities. But no one close enough to call at 3 in the morning. No one who knew the full story of what my family had done to me over the years. "I'll be fine," I said, which wasn't really an answer. After we hung up, I sat with that hollow feeling for a while. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Leonard. "Statement is perfect. I've also taken the liberty of contacting 3 colleagues who might be interested in your hotel concept. They're solid people, no connection to your family. Would you like me to arrange introductions?" I stared at the message, feeling something unexpected tighten in my throat. He was building me an alliance before I'd even asked for one. "Yes. Thank you." His response came immediately. "That's what partners do. Get some rest. Tomorrow changes everything." I tried to follow his advice, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I spent the night refining the statement one more time, making sure every word carried exactly the weight I intended. By 6 in the morning, I was back at my laptop with coffee strong enough to strip paint. I formatted the statement as a press release, added my contact information, and attached documentation, tasteful, professional documentation, that proved every claim I was about to make. At 7 a.m., I uploaded it to a wire service that would distribute it to major business publications and industry journals. Then I posted a condensed version on LinkedIn, where I'd maintained a deliberately low profile for years. The headline was simple: Natasha Holloway announces full acquisition of Harrington Estate, plans new luxury hotel collection. The statement read: Bellevue Heights, Natasha Holloway, principal investor and founder of Holloway Hospitality Partners, announced today the acquisition of full ownership of the Harrington Estate, effective immediately. Holloway has served as the property's primary stakeholder since 2022, when her investment group provided the capital that enabled the estate's restoration and operational revival. The Harrington represents everything I believe luxury hospitality should be: authentic, excellent, and rooted in genuine care for both guests and staff, Holloway stated. As we move forward with full ownership, our vision is to make this property the flagship of a new collection that brings that same philosophy to historic venues across the country. The announcement marks a significant milestone for Holloway, who previously held senior management positions in luxury hospitality across 3 continents before launching her independent investment portfolio. Under the operational leadership of Managing Director Leonard Kirby, the Harrington Estate has achieved a 340% increase in revenue and garnered recognition from leading industry publications. Holloway Hospitality Partners is currently in discussions with several additional properties for potential acquisition. The company operates under principles of transparent ownership, ethical labor practices, and profit-sharing models that benefit all staff members. Holloway, who had been known professionally by her maternal surname to maintain privacy during the investment phase, is the daughter of Diane Ashford and granddaughter of the late Thomas Ashford, founder of Ashford & Company Hospitality Group. She chose to build her portfolio independently, without family capital or company affiliation. I read it through one final time, my finger hovering over the publish button. This was it. The moment that would split my life into before and after. I pressed publish. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. The post sat there on my screen, quiet and unremarkable. Then the notifications started. First a trickle. A few likes from professional contacts I'd worked with years ago. A comment from someone in hotel management congratulating me. Then the trickle became a stream, and the stream became a flood. My phone started ringing. I didn't answer. I just watched as the post was shared, commented on, dissected by people I'd never met who suddenly had opinions about my business decisions, my family dynamics, my choice to use a different surname. Within an hour, a business reporter from the Bellevue Journal had left me 3 voicemails requesting an interview. 2 industry publications had reached out to verify the information. And my LinkedIn connection requests had jumped from a handful to over 200. But the call I was waiting for, the one from my family, that hadn't come yet. At 9:15, Leonard texted, "Well done. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Every major player in luxury hospitality wants to know more about your plans. This is exactly the attention we need." At 9:40, Raymond called. "Natasha, the acquisition is processing faster than anticipated. 2 of the remaining stakeholders saw your announcement and contacted me directly to expedite their sales. They want to be part of this story. We could have final ownership transferred by end of week." End of week. That was 4 days away. "Make it happen," I said. At 10:05, my phone rang with a number I recognized instantly. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then again. Then a text appeared, "We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to her that I hadn't already said in my statement. Instead, I got dressed in my most professional suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind of outfit that communicated serious business, and drove to the Harrington estate. If my family wanted to talk, they could come to me. On my property. In my space. Leonard met me at the front entrance. "Your mother called here looking for you. I told her you were in meetings all day." "Thank you. There's also someone else here." He gestured toward the main salon. "One of the colleagues I mentioned. She drove up from the city as soon as she saw your announcement. Very eager to talk about potential partnerships." I followed him into the salon, where a woman in her 50s stood examining the architectural details of the ceiling. She turned when she heard us enter, and her face broke into a warm smile. "Natasha Holloway," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Adrian Wu. I've been following your work for the past year without realizing it was your work. When Leonard told me the investor behind the Harrington restoration was looking to expand, I knew I had to meet you." We shook hands, and I felt some of the tension in my shoulders ease. She had the kind of presence that suggested competence and integrity, qualities I desperately needed in allies right now. "Leonard speaks highly of you," I said. "He's too kind. But let me speak plainly, I own 3 boutique properties in the Northeast, all of them struggling with the same problem. They're beautiful, they're historic, but they're being crushed by the major chains that can afford to undercut prices and outspend us on marketing. What you're proposing, a collection that can compete with the big players while maintaining independence, that's the only viable path forward for properties like mine." She pulled out her tablet and showed me photos of her hotels. One was a converted manor house in Vermont, another a restored Art Deco building in Providence, the third a coastal inn in Maine. All stunning. All exactly the kind of properties that would fit the vision I was building. "I'm not asking you to acquire them," Adrian continued. "But I am interested in partnership. Shared marketing, collaborative booking systems, bulk purchasing agreements. The things that would give us the advantages of scale without losing our autonomy." It was exactly what I'd been hoping for but hadn't dared to expect so soon. "Let's talk specifics," I said, gesturing to the conference table. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out what a partnership could look like. Adrian was sharp, experienced, and refreshingly direct. She asked hard questions about capitalization, operational standards, and how we'd maintain quality across multiple properties. I answered every one, and by the time we finished, we had the framework of an agreement that could work. "I'll have my attorney draft a preliminary partnership document," I said. If you're comfortable with the terms, we could potentially launch with 4 properties by next quarter. Adrian nodded, gathering her things. Natasha, I have to say, it takes courage to do what you're doing. Breaking away from family money, building something independently, going public with it. A lot of people talk about disrupting the industry. You're actually doing it. After she left, Leonard and I stood in the empty salon. That's one, he said. By end of week, you'll have 5 more conversations just like it. Word is spreading fast. My phone buzzed. Another voicemail from my mother. Then one from Camilla. Then a text from my Aunt Phyllis that simply read, "How could you embarrass us like this?" I showed the text to Leonard. He shook his head. They think you did this to hurt them. They can't comprehend that you did it for yourself. Should I respond? Not yet. Let them sit with it. Let them realize that you're not going to come crawling back to explain or apologize. You've made your statement. Now let your success be the response. He was right. Engaging with them now would only give them ammunition to twist the narrative, to make this about family drama instead of business achievement. Instead, I spent the afternoon taking calls from industry contacts, scheduling meetings with potential partners, and reviewing the accelerated acquisition timeline Raymond had put together. Every conversation, every email, every message confirmed what I'd known but hadn't quite believed: I'd built something real. Something valuable. Something that didn't need my family's validation to matter. At 4 o'clock, Leonard knocked on the office door I'd borrowed. "There's someone here to see you. He says he's your father-in-law." I froze. My what? That's what he said. Preston Dalton's father. He's waiting in the East Garden. I hadn't seen Preston's father in years. He was a venture capitalist who'd made his fortune in tech startups before diversifying into real estate. We'd met briefly at the wedding, exchanged maybe 24 words total. What was he doing here? I walked out to the East Garden and found him sitting on one of the stone benches, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who'd driven out to a property his daughter-in-law now owned. "Mr. Dalton," I said carefully. He stood, extending his hand. "Natasha. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I saw your announcement this morning and had to come see for myself." "See what?" "Whether you were as smart as I suspected you were when you married into our family." He smiled, but it wasn't unkind. "I've been watching the Harringtons turnaround for 2 years. Did some digging into the investment group behind it. Took me longer than it should have to connect Holloway Hospitality Partners to you, but once I did, everything made sense." I didn't know what to say to that. "Preston told me about the baby shower," he continued. "About where they seated you. I'm not here to apologize on their behalf, that's not my place. But I am here to tell you that what you've built is impressive. Genuinely impressive. And if you're looking for additional capital to expand your collection, I'd like to discuss investment opportunities." I studied Preston's father carefully, looking for the angle. In my experience, nobody from my extended family circle offered help without expecting something in return. But his expression remained open, almost curious, as he waited for my response. "Why?" I asked bluntly. "You're connected to the Ashford family through Preston and Camilla. Helping me means going against them." He chuckled, a dry sound that suggested he'd anticipated the question. "Natasha, I've been in venture capital for 30 years. I don't invest based on family politics, I invest based on returns and vision. What you've done with limited capital and no institutional support is remarkable. What you could do with proper backing is exponential. My family will see it as a betrayal. Your family," he said carefully, "has made several strategic errors in judgment over the past decade. Ashford and Company is stagnating. They're coasting on legacy reputation while newer brands eat their market share. Meanwhile, you've identified a genuine gap in the luxury hospitality market and you're moving to fill it. That's not betrayal. That's business." He pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet. "I did some preliminary analysis after your announcement. If you can secure 5 to 7 properties within the next 18 months and maintain the operational standards you've established at the Harrington, you're looking at a conservative valuation of $40 million. With the right expansion strategy, that number doubles in 5 years. The figures on his screen matched my own projections almost exactly. He'd done his homework. What would you want in return? I asked. Equity stake? Board seat? Neither. I'd structure it as a credit facility with favorable terms. You maintain full control and ownership. I provide capital for acquisitions and operational expansion. You pay me back with interest as the properties generate revenue. If you default, which I don't think you will, I have the option to convert debt to equity, but only as a minority stakeholder. It was almost too good. There has to be a catch. The catch, he said, standing up and brushing off his slacks, is that I expect you to succeed spectacularly. Because when you do, it proves something I believed for a long time, that the next generation of hospitality leaders won't come from legacy families resting on old money. They'll come from operators who understand that luxury means more than thread counts and marble bathrooms. He handed me a business card. Think about it. No pressure, no timeline. But if you decide you want to move faster and bigger than your current capital allows, call me. After he left, I sat in the garden for a long time, turning his card over in my fingers. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the perfectly maintained hedges. Somewhere in the building behind me, Leonard was overseeing the evening shift change. Servers arriving, housekeeping finishing their rounds, the quiet choreography of hospitality that most guests never noticed. This was mine now. Really, truly mine. And suddenly there were people appearing, Leonard, Adrian Wu, Preston's father, wanting to help me build it into something bigger. My phone rang. Not my mother this time. Camilla. I answered. You selfish, vindictive bitch. My sister's voice was tight with fury, no pretense of civility. How dare you pull this stunt right after my baby shower? You've made our entire family look like fools. I didn't do anything to you, I said calmly. I announced a business acquisition. That's all. Don't play innocent. You deliberately waited until after the shower to reveal that you owned the venue. You wanted to humiliate us. Actually, I've owned significant stake in the Harrington for 3 years. You're the ones who chose it for your event without bothering to research the property. That's not my problem. Mom is devastated. The entire family is talking. Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation? I felt something cold settle in my chest. Your reputation. Interesting that you're worried about that instead of asking why I felt the need to build a business empire in secret. Or why I was seated by the trash at your celebration. Or why, in 3 years, not one person in this family asked me what I was doing with my life. Silence on the other end. Then, you were always so dramatic. Making everything about you. I made nothing about me. I disappeared. I built something quietly, without asking for your approval or your money. And now that it's successful, suddenly it's a problem. You used a different name. Holloway. You hid who you were. I used my legal name. The one on my birth certificate. The one I'm entitled to use professionally. I kept my voice level, refusing to give her the satisfaction of hearing me angry. But you're right about one thing, I did keep it quiet. Because I knew that if anyone in this family found out, they'd find a way to diminish it or take credit for it or somehow make it about how I'd betrayed the Ashford legacy. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, Camilla, what did Mom say when she found out? Did she congratulate me on building a successful business? Or did she immediately make it about how I'd embarrassed the family? More silence. That told me everything I needed to know. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I continued. I'm doing this because I deserve to succeed on my own terms. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's something you need to examine, not something I need to fix. I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or uncertainty. From release. From finally saying out loud what I'd been holding inside for years. The phone rang again immediately. My mother this time. I sent it to voicemail. Then a text from my Aunt Phyllis. Your grandfather would be ashamed of this betrayal. I deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from a number I didn't recognize. This is Jennifer Kwan from the Bellevue Business Journal. Would you be available for an interview about your announcement? We'd love to feature your story in our upcoming issue on emerging entrepreneurs. I stared at that message for a long moment. An interview. A feature story. My face and my name in a publication that my family read religiously, that their colleagues and competitors read, that would make this real in a way that a LinkedIn post couldn't. I typed back, yes. I'm available. Let's schedule something. Leonard found me still sitting in the garden 20 minutes later. You look like someone who just jumped off a cliff. That's approximately how I feel. He sat down beside me. For what it's worth, you handled that with grace. I could hear your sister from the hallway. You didn't give her an inch. I shouldn't have answered. Maybe. But sometimes people need to hear the truth said plainly. No cushioning, no politeness. Just facts. He pulled out his own phone. Speaking of facts, I have some good news. The staff heard about the ownership change. They're thrilled. They are? Natasha, you're the reason they have profit sharing. You're the reason we implemented fair scheduling and promoted from within instead of hiring external management. They know who fought for those policies. And now that you're taking full control, they're excited about what comes next. That information hit me harder than I expected. I'd fought for those policies because they were right, not because I'd wanted recognition. But knowing the staff appreciated it, knowing they trusted me with their livelihoods, that mattered. There's something else, Leonard said, his tone shifting to more serious. Your family is going to escalate. Now that public humiliation hasn't worked, they'll try other tactics. They'll look for weaknesses in your business structure, unpaid debts, anything they can use to discredit you or force you out. I know. Do you? Because I've seen powerful families destroy careers over smaller slights than this. They have lawyers, connections, influence. They can make things very difficult. Let them try. I looked at him directly. Everything I've built is documented, legal, and clean. They can dig all they want. They won't find anything. Leonard smiled. That's what I needed to hear. Because tomorrow morning, we have 8 property managers from around the region coming to tour the Harrington. They all saw your announcement. They all want to know more about your collection concept. And if even half of them are interested in partnership discussions, you'll have the foundation for something that can't be torn down by family politics. 8 property managers. The alliance was growing faster than I'd imagined possible. I'll be ready, I said. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop to find my inbox flooded with messages. Some were supportive, former colleagues congratulating me, industry contacts asking about job opportunities, hospitality students requesting informational interviews. Others were less kind, anonymous emails calling me ungrateful, accusing me of using my family's name to build success while claiming independence. I read through them all, even the cruel ones, because I needed to understand what narrative was forming around my announcement. The truth was complicated, but public perception rarely was. People would either see me as an inspirational entrepreneur who'd built something from nothing, or as a spoiled daughter who'd stolen family resources and rebranded them as personal achievement. Both versions were wrong, but I couldn't control which one people believed. What I could control was what I built next. I opened a new document and started drafting talking points for the Bellevue Business Journal interview. The reporter would ask about my family, about why I'd used a different name, about whether this was revenge or ambition. I needed clear, honest answers that didn't sound defensive or apologetic. Why did you build your business independently instead of working within the family company? I typed, because I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed based on my own judgment and expertise, not inherited connections. That kind of confidence can't be borrowed, it has to be earned. Were you deliberately hiding your involvement in the Harrington estate? No. I was maintaining privacy during the investment phase, which is standard practice. Many investors prefer to work behind corporate structures until they're ready to take public leadership roles. How does your family feel about your announcement? I paused on that one. The honest answer, that they were furious, embarrassed, and had spent the day trying to make me feel guilty for succeeding, wouldn't serve anyone well. I wrote, my family and I have different philosophies about business. I respect the legacy they've built, and I hope they can respect what I'm building as well. Diplomatic. Non-confrontational. Impossible to twist into drama. I was refining the third question when my phone buzzed with a text from Raymond, acquisition finalized. Paperwork signed by all parties. The Harrington estate is 100% yours as of midnight tonight. Congratulations, Natasha. I read the message 3 times, waiting for it to feel real. Midnight. In 2 hours, I would own, completely, unquestionably, a property worth $8 million. A property that was profitable, respected, and positioned to become the flagship of something much larger. I'd done it. Without my family's money, without their approval, without their name. I'd actually done it. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably awake too, strategizing with my sister about how to handle this embarrassment. My extended family was likely exchanging scandalized phone calls, discussing my betrayal in hushed tones. But I wasn't part of that conversation anymore. I'd stepped out of their story and into my own. At 11:47 p.m., I received an email from the wire service. My press release had been picked up by 12 major publications. By morning, thousands of people would read about Holloway Hospitality Partners and its ambitious plans for independent luxury hotels. At 11:52 p.m., Leonard texted, "Ready for tomorrow?" I typed back, "More than ready." At exactly midnight, my phone chimed with a notification from Raymond's office, official transfer of ownership documents, signed and executed. I saved them to 3 different locations, backed everything up to the cloud, and then, finally, allowed myself to smile. The Harrington estate was mine. And my family's reign of making me feel small was officially over. The morning of the property manager's tour, I arrived at the Harrington before sunrise. The building was quiet except for the early housekeeping staff preparing rooms and the kitchen team beginning prep work for breakfast service. I walked through the main halls, trailing my fingers along walls I now owned, feeling the weight of that reality settle into my bones. Leonard found me in the grand ballroom, where light was just beginning to filter through the tall windows. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Too much adrenaline." I accepted the cup gratefully. "Are we ready for this?" "The property is immaculate. The staff is briefed. The presentation materials are flawless." He paused. "The only question is whether you're ready to stand in front of 8 seasoned hospitality professionals and convince them that you're worth betting on." "No pressure, then." He smiled. "You'll be fine. Just remember, you're not asking for their approval. You're offering them an opportunity. There's a difference." The managers began arriving at 9. Leonard had arranged for them to meet in the conservatory, a glass-enclosed space overlooking the rose gardens that had become one of the estate's signature features. As they filed in, I studied each of them carefully. There was Marcus Chen from a historic inn in Charleston, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and an air of cautious skepticism. Next came Brielle Foster, who managed a mountain resort in Colorado that had been struggling since a corporate buyout gutted its staff. Thomas Reeves represented a waterfront property in Seattle that was fighting to compete with new development. One by one, they introduced themselves, each bringing stories of properties with potential being crushed by market forces beyond their control. By the time the last manager arrived, a woman named Simone Beckett who ran a converted monastery in Northern California, I understood exactly what they needed to hear. I didn't start with a PowerPoint presentation or financial projections. Instead, I started with a question. How many of you have watched a corporate chain open next to your property and immediately undercut your rates? Every hand went up. How many have lost key staff members to those same chains because you couldn't match their benefits packages? Again, every hand. And how many of you have felt like the only way to survive is to compromise on the things that made your property special in the first place? The room went very quiet. I saw recognition in their faces. They'd all been there, all faced that impossible choice between authenticity and survival. That's why we're here, I continued. Because the current model is broken. Independent properties can't compete with chain resources, but chains can't offer what we can: genuine character, personal service, connection to local community. What I'm proposing is a way to get the advantages of scale without sacrificing what makes us different. I walked them through the vision, a collection of independent luxury properties that shared back-end resources, purchasing agreements, marketing infrastructure, booking systems, while maintaining complete operational autonomy. Each property would keep its unique identity and management team. But collectively, we'd have the leverage to negotiate better rates with suppliers, the marketing reach to compete with major brands, and the network to offer guests authentic luxury experiences across multiple destinations. The Harrington is proof of concept, I said, gesturing to Leonard. 3 years ago, this property was failing. Not because it wasn't beautiful or well-run, but because it couldn't compete with chains that could afford to operate at a loss long enough to drive out competition. The investment that saved it wasn't just capital, it was a different philosophy about what luxury hospitality should be. Marcus from Charleston spoke first. This sounds promising in theory. But what's the catch? There's always a catch. The catch, I said honestly, is that this only works if we're all committed to the same standards. I'm not interested in acquiring properties just to inflate numbers. Every location needs to meet rigorous criteria for guest experience, staff treatment, and operational excellence. If you partner with us, you're agreeing to regular audits, shared quality metrics, and potentially significant changes to how you operate. What kind of changes? Brielle asked. Profit sharing with staff. Transparent pricing structures. Sustainable sourcing. The things that cost more in the short term but build loyalty and reputation long term. I pulled up a slide showing the Harrington staff retention rates compared to industry averages. These aren't just nice ideas, they're good business. Our turnover is 60% lower than comparable properties. That saves money on training and maintains service quality. Thomas from Seattle leaned forward. What about the financial structure? Are you looking to acquire properties outright, or is this a franchise model? Neither. I'm proposing strategic partnerships with shared services agreements. You maintain ownership of your property. We provide access to the collective resources of the network. Revenue sharing is negotiated individually based on each property's situation, but the goal is mutual benefit, not extraction. For the next 2 hours, we went deep into details. Leonard presented the operational framework he'd developed. I walked through financial models showing how bulk purchasing and shared marketing could reduce costs by 30 to 40%. We discussed everything from insurance pooling to cross-property staff training programs. The managers asked hard questions. They challenged assumptions, poked holes in projections, demanded to see documentation that proved the Harrington success wasn't just luck or timing. I answered every question with data, with transparency, with the kind of honesty that I hoped would build trust. By the time we broke for lunch, I was exhausted but exhilarated. These were serious professionals who weren't going to be won over by charm or vague promises. They needed proof. And I had it. During lunch, served in the estate's private dining room, the conversation shifted from business to personal. Simone from California told the story of how her monastery property had been days from foreclosure when she'd bought it with money from selling her house. Brielle described watching her Colorado resort soul disappear after the corporate buyout, seeing longtime staff members let go to cut costs. We're all refugees from a system that doesn't care about what we care about, Marcus said quietly. The question is whether we can build something better together. After lunch, Leonard led them on a tour of the estate's operations. They saw the kitchens where staff worked under fair conditions with proper scheduling. They met housekeepers who'd been promoted to supervisory roles. They reviewed the financial statements that showed healthy profit margins despite, or because of, ethical practices. I stayed behind in the conservatory, checking messages on my phone. There were 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from Camilla that read, "We need to talk about this before it goes any further." I deleted the text without responding. There was also an email from Jennifer Kwan, the Business Journal reporter. She'd sent over the interview questions in advance, along with a note, "Your story is generating significant interest. I've received calls from 2 other publications asking about you. Are you open to additional press coverage?" More press meant more visibility, which meant more scrutiny. But it also meant more credibility, more potential partners, more proof that I'd built something real. I wrote back, "Yes. Let's discuss." The managers returned from the tour looking thoughtful. We reconvened in the conservatory, and Leonard turned the floor over to them. "I want in," Simone said immediately. "What you've built here is exactly what I've been trying to create on my own. If we can replicate this across multiple properties, we might actually survive the next 5 years." Thomas nodded. "I need to review the partnership terms with my attorney, but conceptually, this addresses every major challenge we're facing. Count me as seriously interested." One by one, they expressed cautious enthusiasm. Not commitments yet, they were too experienced for that, but genuine interest in exploring partnership. By the end of the meeting, 6 of the 8 managers had requested detailed partnership proposals. The other 2 wanted more time to consider but didn't rule it out. After they left, Leonard and I stood in the now empty conservatory. 6 potential partners, he said. "If even 4 of those convert to actual agreements, you'll have a viable network by next quarter. It's happening faster than I planned." That's what happens when you build something people actually need. He glanced at his watch. "Your mother is in the lobby. She's been waiting for an hour." Security asked if they should send her away. My stomach tightened. "She's here? Demanding to speak with you. I can have her removed if you'd prefer." I considered that. It would be satisfying to have my mother escorted off property I owned, to demonstrate that I had the power to exclude her the way she'd excluded me. But it would also be petty, and worse, it would give her ammunition to claim I was being vindictive. "I'll talk to her," I said. "But in my office. On my terms." Leonard nodded and went to retrieve her. I walked to the office I'd been using, a renovated study on the 2nd floor with mahogany bookshelves and windows overlooking the grounds. I sat behind the desk, the position of authority, and waited. My mother appeared in the doorway moments later, Leonard behind her. She looked impeccable as always, tailored dress, perfect hair, jewelry that suggested wealth without ostentation. But there was tension in her jaw, anger in her eyes. "Thank you, Leonard," I said. "Please close the door." He left us alone. My mother remained standing, taking in the office with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So this is what you've been doing," she said finally. "Building an empire in secret while letting your family believe you were floundering." "I wasn't in secret. I was private. There's a difference. You used a different name. You hid your connection to us. I used my legal name. And I didn't hide anything, I simply didn't announce it. You never asked what I was working on. None of you did." She crossed her arms. "You deliberately chose Camilla's baby shower to make your announcement. Don't pretend that wasn't calculated. The timing was coincidental. I'd been planning to go public for months. The fact that it happened to be days after the shower had nothing to do with Camilla." "Coincidental," she repeated, voice dripping with skepticism. "You owned the venue where we celebrated your sister's pregnancy, and you said nothing. You let us plan the entire event without mentioning that you controlled the property. If that's not manipulation, I don't know what is." I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You're right. I could have told you. I chose not to. Do you know why? I'm sure you're going to tell me. Because you would have ruined it. You would have found some way to diminish what I'd accomplished or take credit for it or make it about how I'd disappointed the family by not joining Ashford and Company. So I kept it quiet until I had something so undeniable that even you couldn't twist it into failure. My mother's expression hardened. You've made your sister cry. You've embarrassed your family in front of everyone we know. And for what? To prove some point about your independence? No. To build a life where my value isn't determined by your approval. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my mother shook her head. You've always been so stubborn. So determined to do things the hard way. The hard way was the only way you left me. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Your grandfather built Ashford and Company from nothing. He gave our family everything we have. And you threw it away to build something that will probably fail within 5 years. Maybe it will, I said. But if it does, it'll be my failure. Not his legacy that I ruined. Not your reputation I damaged. Mine. She left without another word. I sat alone in the office for a long time after, staring at the door she'd walked through, feeling the ache of a relationship that had perhaps never really existed the way I'd wanted it to. But underneath the ache was something else. Something solid and unshakable. I'd faced her. In my office, on my property, with my success as the foundation beneath me. And I hadn't apologized for any of it. 3 months later, I stood in the same conservatory where I'd pitched my vision to 8 skeptical property managers. This time, the room was filled with press, investors, and representatives from 4 properties that had officially joined what was now being called the Holloway Collection. The Bellevue Business Journal had run their feature story 6 weeks earlier. The headline read, "From Invisible to Undeniable, How Natasha Holloway Built a Luxury Hotel Empire Without Family Money." The article had been picked up by national publications, hospitality trade journals, and even a podcast about women entrepreneurs. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since. Leonard stood beside me as photographers captured images of the partnership's signing ceremony. Simone was there from California, Thomas from Seattle, Brielle from Colorado, and Marcus from Charleston. 4 properties, each with their own character and history, now united under a shared philosophy about what luxury hospitality could be. How does it feel? Leonard asked quietly. Surreal, I admitted. 3 months ago, I was sitting by the trash at my sister's baby shower. Now I'm launching a hotel collection that's being called the Future of Independent Luxury. You earned every bit of this. After the formal ceremony ended and the press filtered out, the real work began. The 5 of us, the 4 property managers and myself, gathered around the conference table with laptops, contracts, and coffee that had long since gone cold. Let's talk implementation timeline, I said, pulling up the operational framework we'd been refining for weeks. Marketing rollout happens in phases. First, we establish the collective brand identity while maintaining each property's individual character. Adrienne's team has designed a visual system that's cohesive but flexible. Adrienne Wu had joined us as brand director, bringing her expertise in luxury marketing. She'd helped us develop a positioning strategy that emphasized authenticity, craftsmanship, and local connection, everything the major chains couldn't authentically claim. Booking integration goes live next month, Thomas added. Guests will be able to book any property in the collection through a single platform, but each property maintains control over pricing and availability. We spent 3 hours working through logistics, staff training programs, quality standards, crisis management protocols. It was tedious, detailed work, but it was the foundation that would determine whether we succeeded or became just another failed experiment in hospitality innovation. By the time we finished, the sun was setting over the rose gardens. The other managers headed to their rooms. We'd arranged for them to stay at the Harrington for the week, and I found myself alone in the conservatory once again. My phone buzzed. A text from Raymond, partnership agreements are executed. Congratulations. You're officially running a hotel collection. Another text, this one from Preston's father, saw the press coverage. Impressive work. My investment offer still stands when you're ready to scale further. And one more, from a number I hadn't heard from in weeks. Camilla. I saw the article. The photo of you at the signing ceremony. You look happy. I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't congratulations. But it also wasn't anger or accusation. It was something closer to acknowledgement. I typed back carefully, "I am happy. I hope you are too." Her response came quickly, "The baby's due in 6 weeks. It's a girl." "That's wonderful. Congratulations." A pause, then, "Mom won't admit it, but I think she's impressed. She keeps the business journal article on her desk. Under other papers, but it's there." I felt something tight in my chest loosen slightly. Not forgiveness exactly, and certainly not reconciliation. But maybe the beginning of something less painful than what we'd had before. "Thank you for telling me," I wrote. The conversation ended there. No promises of family dinners or renewed closeness. Just a small crack in the wall that had stood between us, letting in the faintest possibility that someday, we might find our way to something resembling understanding. Later that evening, I walked through the estate one final time before heading home. The building was alive with guests, a wedding reception in the ballroom, couples dining in the restaurant, families checking in for weekend getaways. All of it flowing smoothly, efficiently, maintained by staff who were well paid, respected, and invested in the property's success. I passed the spot where they'd seated me 3 months ago. The overflow table by the kitchen doors. Someone had placed a small bronze plaque there, so subtle that most guests would never notice it. "Leonard's doing, probably." I bent down to read it, "Every empire begins with a single chair." I laughed despite myself. It was absurd and perfect and exactly the kind of gesture that made me grateful I'd found partners who understood both business and humanity. My phone rang. Jennifer Kwan from the Business Journal. "Natasha, I know it's late, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We're running a follow-up piece next week about the Holloway Collection's impact on independent hospitality. I've been getting calls from property owners across the country asking about partnership opportunities. This might be bigger than you anticipated." "How much bigger?" 23 properties have reached out in the past month alone. Most of them are serious inquiries with solid financials. You might need to start thinking about how to scale your vetting process. After we hung up, I sat down on the terrace steps, looking out at the gardens that had become so familiar. 23 properties. The vision I'd outlined just months ago was growing faster than I'd dreamed possible. But growth meant complexity. It meant more staff, more systems, more potential points of failure. It meant transitioning from scrappy startup to legitimate business with all the infrastructure that required. It meant I couldn't do this alone anymore. I pulled up my contacts and found Preston's father's number. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Dalton, it's Natasha. I've been thinking about your investment offer." "I'm listening." "I want to maintain majority ownership and operational control. But I need capital to scale properly, legal team, operations infrastructure, maybe acquisition of 1 or 2 key properties that would anchor different regions." "What kind of capital are we talking about?" I named a figure that 3 months ago would have seemed impossible. Now it felt almost conservative. "That's reasonable for what you're building," he said. "Let me put together a proposal. We can structure this so you maintain control while getting the resources you need to compete at the level your vision requires." We talked for another 20 minutes, outlining the basic framework. When we ended the call, I felt something I hadn't expected, not just excitement, but readiness. I was ready to grow beyond the careful, controlled approach that had gotten me here. Ready to take bigger risks now that I had proof the concept worked. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Leonard, "The wedding party is asking if the owner might stop by for a toast. Apparently the bride read about you and wants to meet the woman who built this place." I smiled and stood up, brushing off my pants. On my way. I walked back into the estate, through the French doors, across the lobby where guests moved with that relaxed contentment that came from feeling truly welcomed. The ballroom doors were open, music and laughter spilling out into the hallway. Inside, a young woman in a wedding dress spotted me and waved me over with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of someone who'd had just enough champagne to be brave. "Are you her? Are you Natasha Holloway?" "I am." "Oh my God." She grabbed her new husband's arm. "Honey, this is the woman I told you about. The one who built this place after her family treated her like garbage at her sister's baby shower." I winced slightly at the description, though it wasn't inaccurate. "I just wanted to say," the bride continued, her eyes shining, "that your story gave me courage. I almost didn't have my wedding the way I wanted because my family had all these expectations. But then I read about you doing things your way, even though everyone told you not to, and I thought, if she can build a whole hotel empire, I can have the wedding I actually want." Her husband nodded. "We're both starting new businesses. Your story reminded us why we're doing it, to build something that's ours, not what our families expect." I felt unexpected emotion rise in my throat. I'd been so focused on the business metrics, the partnerships, the proof of concept that I could succeed. I hadn't fully considered that my story might mean something to people beyond industry circles. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know. And congratulations, on the wedding and the businesses." They insisted I stay for a toast. The bride's father, a jovial man who'd clearly enjoyed the open bar, raised his glass and gave a rambling speech about love, courage, and building your own path. When he finished, he turned to me. "To the woman who proved that the best revenge is success." The room erupted in cheers. I raised my glass, smiling at the imperfect poetry of it all. Later, driving home through quiet streets, I thought about that word. Revenge. Was that what this had been? Standing by the trash at my sister's baby shower, being dismissed and diminished by people who should have loved me, had that been the fuel that drove everything that followed? Maybe at first. Maybe in those early days when anger was the only thing keeping me moving forward. But somewhere along the way, it had transformed into something else. Purpose. Vision. The genuine belief that I could build something meaningful that existed independent of my family's validation. The revenge, if there had been any, wasn't in their embarrassment or my success. It was in the fact that I no longer needed them to tell me I mattered. I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, still the same small apartment, though I could afford better now. I'd move eventually, probably soon given the growth trajectory. But for tonight, it felt right to return to the place where I'd sat at my kitchen table and made the decision to stop hiding. Inside, I made tea and opened my laptop one last time. The partnership agreements were finalized. The press coverage was overwhelmingly positive. The pipeline of potential properties was robust. Everything I'd worked for was happening. But the thing that settled into my bones as I sat there in the quiet darkness wasn't triumph or vindication. It was something simpler and more profound. Peace. 3 months ago, my family had sat me by the trash and never questioned whether I belonged anywhere else. Tonight, I owned the building where it happened. I'd built a collection that was being called transformative. I'd proven, to myself, to the industry, to everyone who doubted, that my vision was viable. But more importantly, I'd proven it to the one person whose opinion actually mattered. Myself. My phone lit up one final time. A text from Leonard. "The wedding party left a 5-star review specifically mentioning you. They're telling everyone about the owner who built an empire after being treated like nothing. Good press for tomorrow." I smiled and set the phone down. Good press. Growing business. Expanding vision. But the real victory was quieter than any headline could capture. It was waking up tomorrow in a life I'd built entirely on my own terms, where no one could ever make me feel small again, because I finally understood that my worth had never been theirs to determine. The Harrington estate had been the beginning. The Holloway collection would be the next chapter. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was simply this: I'd sat by the trash and decided I deserved better. And then I'd built it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.